Hello everyone, welcome back to Scylla's Podcats, or welcome to Scylla's Podcats, and welcome to, honestly, a very laid-back video where I talk about my most disappointing read of 2024. If that sounds contradictory, I don't know where I'm going with this. I just decided that I wanted to sit down today and talk about this book because it's been on my mind this entire time that I wanted to make a video about this, and then I just never did because for some reason I felt that I wasn't prepared enough to talk about this. And then I remembered that all I do on this channel is yap, so we're gonna use that. Very quick disclaimer, most disappointing in this case does not mean it's the worst book I've read. I've done my Stormlight Archive reread. It's been a journey this year. If you want to check out any of the videos I did on that, I'm going to be leaving links to the live shows I did with Sarah and Steph in the description box down below. So those are probably some of the worst rated books this year. But this book has been particularly disappointing to me because of the expectations I've had for it, and so I wanted to talk about it very briefly, and this book unfortunately was Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. There is no one on this earth who was more upset about how much I didn't like this book than myself. I have so far read every single Ava Reid book that came out, and I have every single one of their books. Starting with, what's the first one? The Wolf and the Woodsman, going to Juniper and Thorn, which to this day is my favorite of hers. And then I have the Illumicrate edition of, forgot the other name right now, but I have an Illumicrate edition of one of their books, and I have this really pretty edition of Lady Macbeth. I still think this cover does it for me so well. I love the cover, right? And I was so excited for the concept. I was excited enough to get myself a copy of of Macbeth, which is this new copy. I love these copies. They did 6 editions of Shakespeare's plays like these, and I really want to have every single one of them. In contrast, this looks fantastic, by the way. But, like, I got myself a copy of this. I reread Macbeth to get to Lady Macbeth because I was so excited, because I was like, oh my god, I love Lady Macbeth. I love her existence as, like, basically the only female villain that Shakespeare ever wrote about. And I'm so excited that one of my favorite authors is going to be doing a rereading, and I love their writing style and everything. And then I started the book, and I started having concerns, and every single one of those concerns came true in the worst possible way, and I'm so sad. But let's get into it. Okay, so, this is not a retelling. Technically, it calls itself a reimagining, and I do think that maybe going into it with that mindset might have saved me a little bit of the disappointment, though I don't think a whole lot. And so basically, this is trying to tell the entire story of Macbeth itself from Lady Macbeth's perspective. You know what, let's just start with Macbeth itself. Let's start with what Macbeth is actually about, because I don't know if everyone has read it, and let's just talk about it really briefly. So, Macbeth, the play itself, is basically an archetype situation. It created the archetype of the scheming and not necessarily vengeful, but the scheming duke who is trying to overtake the current king by any means necessary meaning assassination. We follow Macbeth, who is a Scottish lord. Duke? Lord? I always forget which one it is. You know what, let me just look at the characters. I love character guides. He's a Thane. Alright, so Macbeth is the Thane of Glamis, and he would like to take control, partially because 3 witches, which are the most infamous characters in this play to be precise, they are all depicted here as well, because of course they are. These 3 witches prophesy him that he will be king. And so Macbeth basically takes that opportunity to murder his way to the throne. Murder his way through both allies, as well as enemies respectively. First he murders another Thane, for example, to get those lands, and then he just moves his targets higher and higher up the social and political hierarchy until he actually meets the king. He doesn't manage to kill the king's sons, though, and they do in fact manage to avenge their father. They do in fact manage to kill Macbeth in the end. This is possibly one of the bloodier plays that Shakespeare has done, like right up there with Hamlet, where basically everyone dies as well. But the one crucial difference between Macbeth and plays like, for instance, Hamlet, for example, is how much of an importance Lady Macbeth plays in the entire play. Lady Macbeth, as I said, is basically Shakespeare's only female villain who has a very big presence in the play itself. She is basically the reason that Macbeth does not get caught way sooner than he does. There is a moment, for instance, I believe it is in the second act, but anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a little while since I read both of these now. But there is a moment, again, I think in the second act, where Macbeth kills, someone while they are in his thanehood, and he then gets the shivers. He's super nervous. He's like, oh god, what if anyone is catching me? I've literal blood on my hands right now. If anyone walks across the corridor, they're going to know immediately what happened. And this entire plan hinges on him not getting caught. And Lady Macbeth essentially meets him in the corridor and is like, what are you doing? You have blood on your hands, first of all. Go wash yourself off. We are going to figure out how to keep you in running, how to not let anyone find out what you're doing, so you can become king. She is a massive support figure for his vying for power, and she is essentially, in a lot of ways, the reason he does not get caught as soon as, you know, people would like for him to get caught. She is the reason no one knows exactly at first that Macbeth is behind the killing that has happened in his actual household. She is in the know of everything that's going on. This is very important, and she is on his side. Yes, partially, of course, because she is intrinsically tied to Macbeth. If Macbeth is tried for treason, there is a high chance that she will be tried for treason as well, and of course she doesn't want that. She does not want to die because of her husband's mistakes. She does not want to die, period, which I fully understand. Go off, Queen. And so she sticks with her husband this entire time, because now they're in it, right? So might as well really go for it. And of course, because Macbeth gets killed in the end in the final battle about the throne, essentially, after he's climbed the throne of England, she commits suicide because she does not want to get found. She does not want to get tried by anyone who is currently fighting on England's side and not Macbeth's side. Right, so she basically takes herself out of the equation as well. She puts herself into the equation and she takes herself out of it again. And she is a fascinating character. She has a lot of talking time dedicated to her in the play, actually, which is really interesting for a female villainous character like that. And she is incredibly charismatic, in my opinion. And she is also, like I said, she is so interesting as a character. There is so much to her, which, you know, I'm not saying that Shakespeare did not include female characters, because he very much did, and a lot of them are my absolute favorites. Like, Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing is one of my favorite female characters of all time. She is fantastic. The play is fantastic. If you want to laugh, you should have a look at Much Ado About Nothing. Watch a stage production. You can find, I think, like at least 2 of them on YouTube alone. Just go watch them. They're super funny. However, what I love about Lady Macbeth is how incredibly ruthless she is. Because again, she is the only female villain that Shakespeare has ever written so explicitly about. And that's why I was super excited for a retelling or reimagining even more from her perspective, because of course the play itself is not necessarily centering Lady Macbeth in any way, shape, or form. It is centering Macbeth himself, right? Fair enough. He is quite literally the titular character, and because she is only ever called Lady Macbeth and she doesn't have any other name that anyone could refer to her, she is very much an attachment of her husband, which is the entire point, right? She's an attachment of her husband, thus she is on his side when he starts scheming for the throne, because if she's not and he fails, she will fail with him because she is his wife, right? they are a unit whether she likes to or not. It's never insinuated whether or not she doesn't like it, by the way. It's just a fact, right? You know that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are a unit, and if one of them dies, so does the other. If one of them gets found out for treason, so does the other. And so obviously Lady Macbeth does everything in her power for both of them to not get found out. And this ruthlessness, this political intervening, this depiction of a woman who is both powerless because she cannot detach herself from her man, even in name, or specifically in name, but who seizes power herself, who looks at this plot that her husband has laid out and goes, I am going to be in on this. First of all, because I know you're going to fuck it up if I'm not, but second of all, because I choose to. You're not getting rid of me so easily. This is something that I was so looking forward to. And that is precisely what I love about Lady Macbeth so much as a character, right? Because she's both this depiction of a woman who is unable to release herself from her husband, but she is also a woman who sees an opportunity and seizes it with both hands, right? And this, like, very complex dynamic of powerlessness within power, or power within powerlessness, was something that I was really looking forward to, in Lady Macbeth specifically. Because this book, as the back says, by the way, I'm not making this up, promises, where is it? From the Sunday Times best-selling author of A Study in Drowning, that's the one I have the Illumicrate edition of, there we go, comes a reimagining of Lady Macbeth, Shakespeare's most famous villainess, giving her a voice, a past, and a power that transforms the story men have written for her. It sounds great. It sounds right up my alley, right? Because we love to see women in narrative. We love to see women's expansion in narrative and women's roles in narrative. And especially, as I said, with Lady Macbeth in the play itself, there is such a complexity at work, even already in just the play, right? Of how much or little power Lady Macbeth herself has over the situation and over everything that's going on. And I was really looking forward to that. And I got none of it. It's so upsetting to me. So first of all, in fairness of the book does not start immediately with the moments that happen in Macbeth, so we don't immediately already start in Glamis. We start with Lady Macbeth and her name. It's just, I need to look this one up because I do not remember this one. Her name is Rosil, right? She's also just referred to as the Lady, capital L, because, you know, why not? I found that to be quite fun. I liked that. And the book starts with her childhood, or more specifically, how horrible her childhood has been because her father was an incredibly controlling man, and how she then gets married off to the Thane of Glamis, aka Macbeth, and joins his household, right? And then, at some point, later on in the book, we get to the point where the entirety of the play actually happens, where Macbeth tells her about the plans that he has, essentially, where he shows her the witches and basically goes, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, more or less, right? Like, he basically just lays out the facts, which is also not really like it happens in the play, because again, in the play, what happens is that Lady Macbeth essentially catches Macbeth in the act and then goes, nah, honey, we're going to clean this up because you don't know how to do that, right? I like that dynamic a whole lot more. But let's return to Lady Macbeth, the book itself, right? So instead of having this character who has a certain amount of power, because first of all, she is the wife of a Thane, right? Like a very high-ranking lord, okay? Instead of showing her with a certain amount of, like, political power, with a certain amount of societal power, Rosil in Lady Macbeth is always supposed to be this frail outcast who is joining a society she doesn't know anything about. And she's incredibly young. I think she's supposed to be like 19 maybe, like she's very young. She's been married off very young. She is this frail, I'm pretty sure she's described as frail like 10 times at the very least. She's this very frail lady who's being married into this horrendously rustic and like barbarous Scottish thanedom, which there are also so many issues with how Scottish people in particular are depicted in this book, which I'm also not like a super big fan of. Like, it feels very anti-Scottish, pro-British, especially with everything that goes on later with the like two princes, specifically one of them, I believe he's the... is he the elder? I think he's the elder. As you can see, some of the details are very murky, but my feelings remain very bad, unfortunately. Like, it had a very, very odd feeling to it. And the thing is, right, I do think that it is very valid to try and approach a story like this from the angle of showing just how little power women were able to wield sometimes, especially in societies like that. Like, the book itself, let me see if there's like a, is there a date? I don't think there's a date necessarily, like, of when this book takes place. I don't think there is. Right, but whatever. So, you know, it is very, very fairly established that women did not have a whole lot of societal power throughout basically the entirety of human history, it feels like. At least in Western countries, which obviously this is, because this takes place in Scotland and England. Right. So, during times like these, women were often seen, as is the case in Macbeth itself, the extension of their husbands, right? They were seen as sometimes ownership of their husbands, but like at the very least extensions of their husband. That was the entire point. That is also, in my opinion, why we can talk about how Lady Macbeth never gets her own name in the play itself, whereas it is a nice touch to see that she does get her own name here, and the name is actually a very big point that Ava Reid keeps bringing up, where the name is written differently depending on who is talking about her and why, which is kind of like referring this idea that during the time period this is ostensibly set, names were very localized, and so a different name in like 3 counties over, it felt like, could sound like a name could sound very different 3 counties over than it did in the one that you were currently inhabiting, right? Which I think is a fine detail to add. I think it adds some nice dimension, specifically to, in this case, Rosil's character. I did enjoy that. I did enjoy that part. This was introduced relatively towards the beginning. That was something that I was really interested in. And then we got to the incredibly murky parts about how Macbeth, Thane of Glamis, is so overpowering when it comes to Rosil. There's this consistent threat that builds itself throughout the narrative that is trying to reference marital rape, for example, and how afraid Rosil is of that, how she tries everything and anything in her power to not have him in her bed, which again is a fine enough talking point. It was just not at all what I was expecting going into a reimagining about Lady Macbeth herself, who is a villain. And in hindsight, maybe I should have expected something like this, or at least that I would be having issues with this, because as I've read you from the back, it says that this book is supposed to give Lady Macbeth a voice, a past, and a power that she never had before when she was written by men. She has a very famous monologue in the play. What voice are we giving her? She has a voice, right? Like, again, I would have liked for this book to go into the very intricate power dynamics at play here. I would have liked for this book to maybe reference how much Lady Macbeth maybe regrets putting her lot in with her husband, or maybe not regrets, but maybe a moment where Lady Macbeth looks at her husband and is like, if he dies, I die with him, which is terribly unfair, so I suppose I'll have to keep both of us alive by scheming as much as possible, by going along with his plan in order for both of us to remain alive. I would have loved for that to be explored even further. And simultaneously also, like I said, the power dynamic of her being an extension of her husband and basically not even having the luxury to choose entirely on her own, because if her husband is already basically dragging their name through the traitor mat, her name is being dragged through there as well, because she is just Lady Macbeth. She will never be anything except Lady Macbeth. If Macbeth falls, so does she. I would have loved for this book to explore that dynamic and this, like, discrepancy between imagined power, power within a household, and actual power, actual political power with impact that people are going to be listening to. Because, you know, That is what makes Macbeth so fun. That is what entices me every time I think about Macbeth and I reread Macbeth and I look at the play again and I find something else I wasn't paying attention to the first time because I was just trying to understand what the hell was going on in the first place, right? And Lady Macbeth the book does not do any of that. Instead, we get this story, this very common story that I feel like at this point every person who's ever read a feminist retelling of mythology, history, an older book, play, or whatever has read about, which is the frail wife who is super unhappy and who's also being abused, either physically, sexually, both if she's lucky, and who, at the end of the day, wants to choose her own path in some way, shape, or form, while bemoaning what fate has in store for her. And the reason I sound so sarcastic is because I am very much over it. And I think this is, like, the main issue that I've had with Lady Macbeth and the main, like, problematic thing that it falls into, in my opinion, which is relying so overly much on the fact that women did not have power, that it ironically denies the agency that Lady Macbeth has in the play. And I don't understand how we ended up here. Like, I don't understand. Macbeth itself gives you so much to work with when it comes to Lady Macbeth, when it comes to her character, when it comes to her motivations. Like, she is such a fleshed out character already in the play. And of course I'm not saying you have to follow the play beat for beat, which again is also not what this book does, which is something that I was very fine with. I liked this, like, exploration of that. And I also found it intriguing to see what exactly was going on with the witches, for example, because in Lady Macbeth, Macbeth himself actually keeps the witches locked in his basement, in his cellar, basically. And so there was this very interesting, like, conversation opened about men wielding female power, so even if you have magical powers, which Lady Macbeth, like, Rosil actually has in the book, which was also something where I was over there like, I feel like if we just kept it as the metaphor of men being afraid that she has magical powers that can influence them in order for them to, like Rosil more or something like that, or, like, call her a vile temptress. I think if we'd stayed at the metaphorical part of this, I would have been more fine with it. The literal her having magic part was something that I wasn't too keen on as well. It was a little bit odd, in my opinion. And, like, with the witches, as I said, or as I started to say before I derailed myself, I'm very sorry about this, by the way. I think this is a little bit of a mess, but you know what, at this point, yes, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And we would have had such an interesting conversation that could have been opened about men wielding female power by imprisoning female power, quite literally taking ownership of female power, and how, despite everything, these women do still have power on their own, which, to an extent, is what we get. But it has been diluted so much, and it has been mixed in so much with this imagery of Lady Macbeth being a frail little thing, afraid of her brutish husband's vials and everything that he's doing. And I was just not feeling any of that. And I think, again, I've already mentioned that, but I think this is, like, a common mistake that we keep having right now with feminist retellings that are trying to give female people or female characters or, in general, women a voice, quote-unquote, is this insistence upon women having always been oppressed in the worst ways imaginable. And the biggest problem I have with that is that it completely ignores any intersectionality, it completely ignores the moments or the instances in which women did in fact have power, and it just focuses on the moments where women were incredibly powerless. And especially for a character like Lady Macbeth, who gives so much nuance, who has so much potential for nuance, this was devastating to me because it ruined everything about Lady Macbeth as a character, in my humble opinion. And yes, spoiler illusion, there is a reason I suppose, within the book where you could say that, yeah, maybe there is a reason Russell is so different from the Lady Macbeth in the play, because technically they're not even fully supposed to be the same person. However, consider that that still does not excuse everything else that's going on in this book. And considering that this happens like way later in the book, there's just a very different expectation that this book carries with it that is never fulfilled, at least for me. And what also made me so sad is, again, I love Lady Macbeth as a character in the play, right? And it just feels like Ava Reid was trying to write a story that was reminiscent of Macbeth, with like the similar plot points with the three witches and the betrayal of the king and trying to kill the king, ultimately succeeding, and then in the end actually being killed in the exact same way that a prophecy told him, even though none of the prophecy seemed to make sense. You know, all that good stuff, right? It feels like Ava Reid was trying to write a story like that, but didn't actually want to work with Lady Macbeth as a character. And that, I personally think, is very sad. And I think it's also kind of insulting to your readership, because you name the book after a titular character in an incredibly popular play by the most popular English poet, right? You do that, and then you seem to not want to work with the character at hand. You want to make your own character, which is fine. It's fine if you want to insert your own character and also insert with that character the purpose of why you're writing this book, because every author, usually, has a purpose behind the changes that they make to reimaginings. They have a purpose as to why they choose a certain character as a POV character, and that purpose shapes the entire story. If you switch the POV characters, you'd be switching the purpose of the story, right? That is basic storytelling 101. So I don't necessarily have an issue with Ava Reid saying I need a different feel protagonist for this to work, because I want to tell a different message than the play does, because the play is your basic I would like to be king now, please, thank you plotline, right? That's what it is. That's what Macbeth is. It's fun at times and very bloody, but that's what it is. And Lady Macbeth was trying to do something different, which I can appreciate, but you replaced the titular character of your book with a caricature of a frail woman who is not allowed to have power within the societal construct you built around her. And I don't think that that is fair towards your readership. Even the ones, like, I can maybe see this book working for people who don't know Macbeth. I can maybe see this book working for people who have no interest in knowing Macbeth, in which case, more power to you. But this is very explicitly supposed to be a reimagining. So Ava Reid herself does not want this book to stand fully separate from the play itself. This is supposed to be in a similar vein, and I'm just going to name this one because it's the most popular, the one that's most talked about. It is supposed to be in a similar vein as Circe by Madeline Miller is, wherein the author takes a female titular character of a grander epos, in this case, you know, an actual epos, in this case a play, and puts that character at the forefront of everything that's going on in order to tell these stories slightly differently. As I said, the POV changes the story, and maybe have that character gain more agency within the story. Now, I would also like to say, having a character experience, in this case, misogyny, and not being able to fully do something about this, and being a consistent victim of misogyny, does not mean that they are without agency. Agency does not have to mean that the character acts upon something. Agency means that the character has a purpose that drives them in a certain direction, which also means agency is the ability to tell your story, right? So the issue I have, once again, is also not the fact that Lady Macbeth, Russell in this book, is consistently made to be a victim of misogyny. I personally do think that Ava Reid is very well versed in depicting misogyny, in depicting female characters suffering from societal abuse, suffering from parental abuse, suffering from spousal abuse. I do think that she's very good at that, and in and of itself, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with that if the character you use for that is Lady Macbeth. That's where I have a problem with this. Because Lady Macbeth does not fit this narrative, and at this point I am very tired of only ever seeing this narrative when exploring mythology, older tales, etc. from a female perspective. Because yes, of course, women have suffered and continue to suffer from misogyny. We don't need to debate that. If you want to debate that, you are just flat out wrong, and there is approximately 1,500 examples I could cite just off the top of my head. Just look at the comments that people are dropping about The Witcher 4, for example, okay? Like, let's be for real here. Of course women are suffering from misogyny and have suffered from misogyny, and of course society has always deemed women lesser as, but a lot of women still existed within a framework of society that gave them a relative amount of power. Lady Macbeth would have had, if she ever existed in real life, a relative amount of power, which she seizes in the play by explicitly allying herself with her husband and trying to make sure to the very end that his ploy is successful. None of that, absolutely none of that happens in Lady Macbeth. Yes, there are political instances where she basically tries to scheme, but it is always centered around her survival. Insular, isolationist, her survival. She does not like her husband, she does not really care about her husband, every single scene that is with her husband is severely uncomfortable, and again, depicting abusive relationships in books is perfectly fine. Sometimes it can feel even empowering to finally see an abusive relationship be depicted. Why did we have to choose Lady Macbeth for that, though? Couldn't we have left the woman alone? Couldn't we have actually depicted the very, very charismatic villainess in this story? She gives you a monologue, an entire monologue to work with, and you do nothing with it. I am so disappointed with this book. I am so sad about how it turned out. It has severely turned me off of, like, retellings, especially, like, feminist retellings, aka retellings that label themselves as feminist, whether or not they are is a completely different thing. It has made me reconsider if I want to pick these books up. Especially from authors I don't know, but apparently also from authors I do know, of which I've enjoyed basically everything else. I'm pretty sure I gave at least 2 of her other 3 books 5 stars. I know that I gave Juniper and Thorn 5 stars, and I'm pretty sure I gave A Study in Drowning 5 stars as well. I couldn't do anything with this. It was horrendous for me. It was so disappointing. I was so sad. Why do we have to keep doing this, where we deny women agency while pretending to give them the agency they didn't have in the original? When she had agency! Lady Macbeth could have chosen to let her husband die in a ditch, right? And sure, it would have meant that she was going to be suffering too, right? Like, it's not that she decided to help him out of the goodness of her heart. It was partially for her own survival, as I've said multiple times in this video. But she had the agency to choose that. Without her, Macbeth would have been caught, like, in the 2nd act or something, right? Please, can we stop with retellings that take away the complexity of the original situation and then have to reduce the woman to a victim of both society and men so immediately that any 3-dimensionality you wanted to add to the conversation by having a book entirely from the perspective of someone who did not get a whole lot of perspective in the original stripped away? Why? I'm so disappointed in this. Alright, this was all over the place. I'm super sorry about that. I hope that you enjoyed it nonetheless. If you've read Lady Macbeth, please tell me in the comments down below how you thought about it, and please tell me when you do if you've also read the original, or know the original, have seen the play, for example. You don't have to have read the play in order to be able to talk about it, right? Because I would really like to see if this book hit with an audience that didn't know the play, in which case it has just failed as a reimagining and not as an original story, which I would be marginally more okay with, but as a reimagining, in my opinion, it has fully failed the mark. It has not hit a single thing that it seemed to have wanted to hit. I am very mad and upset about that because I was really looking forward to this book. And it's so pretty. I will be keeping it just because it's so pretty, but the only way I'm rereading this is if I want to mark out every single moment that I find upsetting. So, I might do that at some point and do like a more critical review of it as well. But right now I'm just left feeling incredibly disappointed. This was absolutely not it. Ava Reed, I know you can write better. I know that you have the ability to depict women more complex than you did with Lady Macbeth. Please, please, in general, for every single author out there, can we stop pretending that we're feminists when all we're doing is stripping away agency from female characters and reducing them to victimhood? Thank you very much. That is all for today. Even though this was very ranty, I do hope that you're having a nice reading experience yourself and that you keep having a nice reading experience. I'm probably going to go have a nap now, and I will see you soon.